Dig the ditch deeper. I want his shop knee-deep by midnight,
she shouted at the foreman, then kicked over my survey stake with the toe of her boot. The next morning I found my workshop under 6 inches of muddy water, my late wife's cherry slabs floating like coffins, and a $40,000 bandsaw motor ruined beyond repair. Her name was Tricia Lockwood Sterling, HOA board president of Sycamore Hollow Country Club, Pennsylvania, 42, polished, blonde, drunk on hedge fund money. Mine was Garrett Mercer. I'm a 72-year-old Finnish carpenter. My daughter Annie is a watershed hydrologist with the State Department of Environmental Protection. Tricia did not know that. By the end of the month, I had pulled 1 set of culverts off my own land, and 3 holes of her precious golf course had become a permanent swamp. What would you do if a stranger flooded your life's work on purpose? Where are you watching from tonight? Stay with me. The Mercer family bought the 82-acre tract on Pickwick Run in 1798. The original deed is in a glass case at the Lancaster County Historical Society. My great-great-great-grandfather, Eli Mercer, was a Pennsylvania Dutch cabinet maker who'd walked west from Philadelphia with a hand plane and a Bible. He built the original house himself, out of yellow pine and limestone. 6 generations of Mercers were born in that house. 3 generations were buried in the family plot behind it, under the white oak that came up in 1817, according to my father's records. I am the 7th generation. I was born in the upstairs east bedroom in 1953. I learned Finnish carpentry from my grandfather Mercer in the original shop behind the farmhouse, starting at age 9. The summer he handed me my first jack plane and told me to sharpen it 3 ways before I touched a board. I apprenticed under a Lancaster master cabinet maker named Whitcomb after high school, took a 2-year woodworking certificate at the Williamson Free School outside Philadelphia in 1973, and went into business for myself in 1975. I have practiced Finnish carpentry for 49 years. I built the workshop in stages between 2008 and 2010. 1,800 square feet, post and beam construction. Oak timbers I'd milled myself from a fallen tree on the back 40. I designed it for serious cabinet work. A custom German bandsaw, a saw-stop industrial table saw, a 14-foot jointer, a dust collection system that ran 60 feet of overhead duct, and a custom dehumidification kiln in the East Annex for drying cherry and walnut stock from a 6-acre stand my grandfather had planted in 1948. The workshop sat at the southwest corner of my pasture, on a level pad I'd cut into the gentle slope where the land bottomed out toward Pickwick Run. I had built it to last 100 years. $200,000 in total by the end. Sweat, savings, my pension, and a small bridge loan I'd paid off in 3 years. My wife Joanne died of breast cancer in November of 2019. We had been married for 47 years. She had been a quilter, the kind whose work had hung in the Lancaster Quilt Museum, and a maker of unreasonable casseroles. The last quilt she ever finished was a wedding ring quilt for our daughter Annie. It still hangs over Annie's bed in her Harrisburg apartment. Joanne's last project in the workshop with me had been the milling of 3 2-inch thick cherry slabs from a tree she had loved on the south fence line. The slabs were drying in the kiln when she went into hospice. They were finished a week after she died. I had not been able to make anything from them yet. I had been waiting for the right thing to make. The slabs lived on the east wall of the workshop on a custom rack I'd built. Joanne's name was burned into the rack with a pyrography iron. The letters were her own handwriting, traced from her grocery list. Sycamore Hollow Country Club and Estates was built next door to the north in 2014, on what had been the Hostetler Dairy Farm, 146 acres of rolling pasture sold by the Hostetler grandchildren when the last brother retired. The new owner was a development group out of King of Prussia called Lockwood Sterling Holdings. They built 124 luxury homes around an 18-hole Tom Fazio-designed golf course, a clubhouse with 2 pools, a tennis facility, and a gated entrance. The 18th green sat 180 feet north of my workshop. The 15th fairway sloped down toward my pasture, the natural watershed of the entire property. I knew this because my grandfather had taught me to read land at age 7, ran south. The water from those 146 acres had been flowing into Pickwick Run, across my property, for 10,000 years. In the summer of 2013, before the course was built, the developers had asked me for a drainage easement. They had needed to install a series of culverts and tile under the north edge of my property to manage runoff during construction. I had granted the easement in writing, drafted by my own lawyer at the time, a man named Howard Garrick. The easement contained 2 clauses Howard had insisted on. First, the easement was revocable on 90 days written notice if the grantee parcel materially altered the agreed flow rate or caused harm to the grantor's property. Second, the easement specifically prohibited any structure or piping that diverted water in a manner contrary to the natural watershed gradient. I had signed it in good faith. The developers had signed it in good faith. The general contractor had signed it. Everyone had been polite. The course had opened in 2014. The first 9 years had been quiet enough. The 2013 easement agreement, by the way, was a 4-page document I keep in my safe. I want you to picture the moment it was signed. October of 2013, a Tuesday afternoon. Howard Garrick across the kitchen table in his gray suit. The lead engineer for the development across from him in a pressed Carhartt. Joanne pouring coffee for everyone in her good apron. Howard reading the revocation clause aloud, twice, slow, the way he read every clause that mattered. The engineer nodding, the general contractor smiling. Everyone signing in blue ink. Howard had said when the engineer left, "Garrett, keep this in the safe. You will not need it for 30 years. When you need it, you will need it on a Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. He had been off by about 10 years. He had not been off about the morning. Tricia Lockwood Sterling moved into Sycamore Hollow in 2018. Her husband Reed ran a hedge fund out of Bryn Mawr. They bought the largest pad on the development. 8,000 square feet, 6 bedrooms, a view straight down the 15th fairway onto my pasture and my workshop roof. Tricia did not like the view. She got herself elected HOA board president in 2020. Within a year, she had also gotten herself appointed the de facto manager of the golf course, by way of a budget arrangement she'd worked out with the original developer's management company. She was, by 2021, the most powerful private citizen on the property. She used that power the way some women use a country club tennis racket, for show and for hitting things. The first letter arrived in February of 2021. It was from the Sycamore Hollow HOA management company, asking whether I'd consider voluntarily removing or relocating the workshop because it had been deemed visually inconsistent with the community aesthetic. I declined politely in writing. I am not now and have never been a member of the Sycamore Hollow HOA. The workshop sat on land my family had owned for 226 years. I added that I had granted the development a drainage easement in good faith and expected the same courtesy in return. I sent the letter certified mail. I kept the return receipt. The reply came 2 weeks later. It was a 5-page brief from a Philadelphia law firm laying out the HOA's concern that non-conforming pre-existing uses may in time become legally actionable under nuisance doctrine. Translation: she had spent $1,500 on a lawyer to threaten me. I forwarded the brief to Howard Garrick's son, who had taken over the practice. The younger Garrick was a man named Brennan Quill, 46, environmental specialty, with a habit of laughing once at intimidation letters and never again. He read it, called me, and said, "Garrett, they have no standing. Save the certified envelope. We'll need it later." I saved it. Tricia had a specific way of moving through the world. I came to know it because I spent 4 years watching it from my fence line. She drove the white Range Rover everywhere, even to the pickleball court 200 yards from her house. She wore her hair in a 35-year-old's blowout at 42. She used a wireless earpiece in restaurants. She tipped on the pre-tax subtotal. She called the cleaning service the girls. She had near her front gate a stone sign that read, "The Sterlings," in granite-cut letters that cost $2,000. She had a lab she rarely walked. She drank Chardonnay from her own glassware at the clubhouse. She was, in summary, a particular type of person, not rare in the affluent suburbs of southeastern Pennsylvania, but rare enough on the Lancaster County back roads that the people in Crescent Hill and Bird in Hand had her number within 4 months of her arrival. The Hoastettlers, whose dairy farm had been sold under their feet, called her the country club queen. The Mennonite farmers down the road called her Mrs. Sterling, politely, with the precise tone they use for people they have already decided not to like. Between 2021 and the spring of 2024, Tricia Lockwood Sterling filed 11 separate complaints against my property. 3 with Lancaster County Code Enforcement, 2 with the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, which is where my daughter worked, on a different team. 2 with the Pennsylvania State Police, alleging I'd been operating an unlicensed firearms range on my back 40. I had not. I had shot a possum in 2022 with a single .22 round from my porch because the possum had been killing my hens. The county dismissed the complaints in 4 to 7 business days each. The state dismissed them faster. Annie laughed at one of them over Sunday dinner and said, "Dad, this one cited you for a commercial milling operation. I didn't know your hobby had become a felony." I told her I had added it to the list of things I never knew about myself. The water trouble began in the spring of 2022. The first time the workshop took serious water was a Tuesday afternoon in April, 3 days after a hard rain. I came in from the back 40 and found a 1/4 inch of water across the southwest quadrant of the floor. The water had come up through the slab. I bailed for 3 hours. I called Bart Kunkel, my old high school friend who ran a drainage business out of Mannheim. Bart came out the next morning, walked the perimeter, measured grades with a laser level, and said, "Garrett, something's pushing water onto your pad. Your slope is fine. The ground's saturated past where it ought to be." I asked him whether it could be from the golf course. He said, "Could be. I'd need to dig to find out. You want me to?" I told him to give me a day to think. Between April of 2022 and the early spring of 2024, the workshop took on water during 14 separate storm events. Some were minor, a 1/4 inch across the slab, a Sunday afternoon of bailing with a wet vac. Some were not. 3 inches in October of 2023 destroyed $1,100 of finishing lacquer and ruined the felt pad on the table saw. I installed 2 sump pumps in the southwest corner. I trenched a French drain along the south wall. I raised the cherry rack and the maple drying rack on cinder blocks. I sealed the slab with marine-grade epoxy that cost $6,000. Each storm still produced more water than the last. By March of 2024, I had spent $11,000 trying to dry a workshop that should have been bone dry. The water was not coming through the slab. The water was coming up through a particular crack in the southwest corner that pressurized whenever there was rain on the Hoastetler land. The crack had not been there in 2010. The crack had appeared in 2021. Annie had measured it. Annie had taken a sample. The crack had not been natural concrete settlement. The crack had been caused by hydrostatic pressure from the hidden pipe Bart and I would later locate, 3 feet under my pasture, 14 yards from my workshop door. I called Annie that night. She listened. She drove down from Harrisburg the next weekend with a survey wheel, a Trimble GPS unit, and a thermos of coffee. She walked my property line for 6 hours. She walked Sycamore Hollow's outer perimeter for 3 more, with permission from Earl Whitaker, the course superintendent, a 58-year-old union groundskeeper who had grown up in nearby Bird in Hand and who had been polite to me for 10 years. Annie sat on my porch that Sunday evening with her laptop open and said, "Dad, the original watershed gradient on this property and the Hoastetler land slopes from north to south at an average grade of 2.4%. Pickwick Run is the historical receiving body. The 2013 easement agreement permitted 3 12-inch culverts at the north property line, draining into a 40-foot earthen swale you maintain. The current configuration on the Sycamore Hollow side is not 3 12-inch culverts. It is a network of 8 French drains, 2 retention basins with hidden overflow standpipes, and 1 24-inch reinforced concrete pipe that I cannot find on any submitted permit. The pipe outlet, Dad, is on your land, underground, under your pasture, pointed straight at the southwest corner of your workshop pad. I asked her if she was sure. She said, I followed the GPS coordinates. I dug a test pit. I touched the pipe with my hand. I have photographs. Dad, they have been pushing water onto your land for 10 years. I sat on the porch a long time. The frogs were starting up in Pickwick Run. The bats were working the magnolia. I thought about Joanne. I thought about the cherry slabs in the kiln. I thought about Howard Garrick's careful language in the 1986 easement document. I said, Annie, what do we do? She said, Dad, we document. We build the case. We do it slow. We let them keep doing it on tape until they cannot deny it. Then we revoke the easement, file the federal violations, and put the natural drainage back. The natural drainage, Dad. If we put it back, the water that's been hitting your workshop is going to go where it has gone for 10,000 years. Down the gradient, through what is now their 15th fairway and their pool deck and their pro shop. I looked at her. I said, Annie, are you telling me one pipe controls all of it? She said, one pipe and a berm. The easement they begged you for in 2013 is the only thing keeping their golf course dry. Pull it out and the water goes home. I made coffee. We did not sleep that night. We made a list. The list ran 2 years. For the next 23 months, we built the case the way you build a piece of fine furniture. Slow, careful, every joint dry-fitted before the glue. Annie made the trip down from Harrisburg every other weekend. She brought her survey equipment, her DEP technical manuals, and her quiet certainty. She drew a 1-page watershed map I taped to the inside of my workshop door. The map showed the original drainage, the 2013 easement, the current configuration, and the proposed restoration. The proposed restoration was outlined in red. Red meant the simplest line on the page, a single 40-foot berm and the removal of the hidden 24-inch concrete pipe. The simplest line on the page was the whole story. While Annie surveyed, I documented. Every storm, every water event, every gallon I pumped out of the slab, every receipt for sandbags, every replacement filter for the dust collection. I installed a wireless flow sensor on the underground pipe outlet, a small unit Bart helped me bury, that pushed real-time discharge data to a cloud account in 2-minute intervals. I installed 3 game cameras pointed at the north easement boundary. I installed a 4th, hidden, on the eaves of my workshop, pointed at the Sterling driveway. The 4th camera was Annie's idea. She said, Dad, people who do this kind of thing eventually direct it in person. We need to be ready for that. I called Earl Whitaker, the course superintendent, on a Wednesday morning in October. I asked him whether he'd come down to the property and talk. He said yes. He drove down in his work pickup. He sat on my porch with a cup of coffee. He looked at Annie's watershed map for a long minute. He looked up. He said, Garrett, I told her in 2014. I told her again in 2017. I told her again the day she put me in charge of the budget. I said, Mrs. Sterling, we have to do this right. We have to file the NPDES amendment. We have to disclose the pipe. She told me there was no time, no money, and no need. She told me the pipe was a temporary construction measure. I am the superintendent of a golf course. I am not a lawyer. I trusted her. I asked him whether he would say so on the record someday. He said, Mr. Mercer, I will say so under oath in any courtroom in this Commonwealth. I asked him if he had documents. He said, I have 9 years of internal memos, sir. I keep paper copies in my garage. My wife thinks I am paranoid. She also thinks I am right. I asked him if he would be willing to share them when the time came. He said yes. I thanked him. He drove home. He texted me an hour later from his driveway. The text said simply, "Mr. Mercer, I am so glad you called. I have been waiting 9 years for somebody to ask." While we built the technical case, Annie quietly built the financial one. Pennsylvania Common Interest Community Law allows any homeowner adjacent to an HOA to make a public records request for the HOA's financial disclosures if the HOA has filed an action affecting the homeowner's property. Trisha's 11 complaints qualified. Annie requested the books on a Wednesday morning in February of 2023. The management company sent her the thumb drive by close of business Thursday. By Saturday night, Annie had a 30-page memo at the kitchen table. The memo had 3 findings. First, the Sycamore Hollow HOA had been paying $4,800 a month to a Lancaster County LLC named LSH Aesthetic Services for community stormwater consulting. 61 straight months, $292,800. The LLC was registered to a P.O. box in Wayne, Pennsylvania. The registered agent was Trisha's husband, Reed Sterling. The W-9 on file matched Trisha's social. Second, the HOA had been paying Garber Drainage LLC, Bart Kunkel's competitor across town, a contractor known by Bart and Earl alike as a man who never refused a job for cash, for 3 stormwater enhancement projects since 2020. Each project had cost the HOA between $40,000 and $70,000. None of the 3 had filed a Pennsylvania DEP NPDES permit. None had been disclosed at HOA general meetings. Third, the most recent enhancement, scheduled for May of 2024, was budgeted at $114,000. It was described in the budget document as additional capacity expansion. Annie ran the elevations. The additional capacity would double the flow at the hidden pipe outlet on my pasture. The enhancement was an unpermitted plan to deliberately flood my workshop. She turned the laptop around. She said, "Dad, we have to wait." I asked her what she meant. She said, "Dad, if we move now, she backs off and we get an embezzlement case. 3 years. She'll be out in 18 months and trying it again on somebody else. If we let her do the May enhancement on camera, and we will, because Bart's flow sensor will timestamp every gallon, she commits a Federal Clean Water Act violation and a State Stormwater Management Act violation and an intentional destruction of property felony all on the same week. We will have her on tape, on paper, and on every monitoring station within 5 miles. The state will lead the case. We will not have to." I sat for a long time. I thought about Joanne. I thought about my grandfather, who had taught me to read land at 7. I thought about the cherry slabs that still lived on the east wall under Joanne's pyrography signature. I thought about the workshop floor I had laid with my own knees in 2009, my old shop floor knees, which had not been good for kneeling even then. I said, "Annie, the cherry slabs." She said, "Dad, the cherry slabs are insured. We will replace what can be replaced. What we cannot replace is the chance to stop her from doing this again." I said, "Get the slabs out of the workshop. Tonight. Move them to the back of the dairy barn. Cover them with tarps. Insure them separately." She looked at me. She said, "Dad, that's brilliant. I'll do it now." We moved the cherry slabs that night. We moved them with my old hay wagon and 2 of Annie's college friends she'd recruited by phone for pizza. We hid them in the dairy barn under canvas, behind the old combine. We did not move the bandsaw. We did not move the kiln. We did not move anything else. The workshop had to look untouched when the May enhancement came. The enhancement had to do its full damage. The damage had to be cataloged. The case had to be airtight. We continued to build the case through April. Annie filed preemptive technical declarations with the DEP. Brennan Quill drafted the easement revocation notice on letterhead and held it in his desk for the day we needed it. I installed 2 more game cameras pointed at the hidden pipe access. The manhole-style cleanout cap Garber drainage had buried under 3 inches of sod near the property line. We tested the wireless flow sensor. We tested the cloud backup. We tested the high-definition footage from the fourth eaves camera. Earl Whitaker quietly photocopied his 9 years of internal memos and brought them to my house in 2 banker's boxes on a Sunday morning. I gave him a cup of coffee. He gave me his cell phone number and his work email and the personal email of his union steward. We were ready. In the week leading up to the 17th, Annie and I made a final pass through the technical evidence the way you make a final pass through a piece of furniture before staining. Slow, gentle, checking every joint, every seam. The flow sensor data was clean. The game camera footage was time-stamped and uploaded to 3 separate cloud servers. The fourth eaves camera had captured the Sterling driveway every night for 6 months. Earl's banker's boxes were in my dairy barn. Brennan's easement revocation notice was sitting on his desk in a sealed envelope. Annie's 2-year-old watershed map was taped inside my workshop door. The simplest line on the page was still in red. The line had not moved. I slept badly the night of the 16th. I sat on the porch at 3 a.m., with a cup of coffee and the old hound dog Joanne had named Beecher snoring at my feet. I thought about my grandfather, who had built the dairy barn in 1948 by himself with a borrowed mule. I thought about Joanne, who had once told me that water was always the most honest thing in a fight, because water never lied about where it wanted to go. I thought about Annie, asleep in her childhood bedroom, with her DEP field kit packed in her car for the morning. I thought about the cherry slabs hidden in the dairy barn under canvas. I said, in the dark, mostly to myself, "Joanne, we made the right choice. The water will tell on her. The water always does." Beecher sighed. I went back to bed at 4. I did not sleep again. She moved on the night of the 17th of May. Tricia Lockwood Sterling pulled into the Sycamore Hollow service entrance at 10:41 p.m. in her white Range Rover with her headlights off. The fourth eaves camera caught her plate. She got out and walked across the 15th fairway in white sneakers. She met Bart Kunkel's competitor, a man whose name was Hank Garber of Garber Drainage, LLC, age 54, 3 prior DEP enforcement actions, at the buried cleanout cap on my property line at 10:48. The third game camera caught them both. The audio caught what she said next. It caught what she said for the next 19 minutes. It caught the specific sentence I would later hear played back in a federal courtroom in Philadelphia. "Dig the ditch deeper. I want his shop knee-deep by midnight." It caught Hank Garber's response. "Mrs. Sterling, that's going to take a felony." It caught her response. "Then it's a felony. I am tired of the man living there. I want him out by Christmas." It caught her kicking my surveyor's stake. The stake had Annie's initials on it. Hank Garber drove a small backhoe across the 15th fairway at 11:03. He dug for 1 hour and 14 minutes. He cut a new 4-foot trench from the buried pipe outlet directly toward the southwest corner of my workshop pad. He severed 2 of the original 2013 easement drains and rerouted them into the new trench. He coupled the rerouted flow to a temporary high-volume relief pipe he had brought on the back of his truck. He ran the relief pipe to within 12 feet of my workshop wall. Then he opened a valve. The cloud-uploaded flow sensor recorded the result in 2-minute intervals, a sustained discharge of 320 gallons per minute, sustained for the next 6 hours. By dawn, the southwest quadrant of my workshop had taken 6 inches of muddy water. 2 of the cherry slabs Joanne had cut would have been ruined. They were not, because they were in the dairy barn. The bandsaw motor was. The saw-stop electronics were. The kiln control board was. The dust collection blower was. 18 finished pieces awaiting delivery were ruined. 8 years of secondary stock, walnut, white oak, Sitka spruce, were soaked through. I woke at 5:30, looked out the kitchen window, and saw water moving across the pasture in a sheet. I dressed. I walked down. I opened the workshop door. I stood for a long minute looking at the wreckage of my life's work. Joanne's pyrography signature on the empty cherry rack caught the dawn light. The signature was the only thing in the workshop the water had not yet reached. I did not cry. I picked up my phone. I called Annie. She answered on the first ring. I said, "Annie, it's done." She said, "Dad, I'm on the highway. I'll be there by 7. Do not touch anything. Do not move anything. I am calling the DEP regional office now. Brennan is on the other line." By 7:30, the property was full of professionals. Annie arrived first in her DEP-credentialed personal vehicle. Behind her, 2 field hydrologists from the DEP South Central Regional Office in Harrisburg. Behind them, an enforcement officer named Dr. Ingrid Vogel, 51, German-born, the most precise human being I have ever met, who set up a sampling perimeter inside 90 minutes. Brennan Quill arrived at 8 with a paralegal and a banker's box of court filings. Bart Kunkel arrived at 8:15 with his pump truck and his work crew. He did not run the pumps. He waited for DEP authorization to disturb the evidence. He sat on my porch step with his ball cap in his hand. Earl Whitaker drove up at 9 in his personal pickup, wearing a clean shirt. He had taken the day off. He had brought his 2 banker's boxes of memos. He set them on my kitchen table without speaking. Dr. Ingrid Vogel walked the southwest pasture in a pair of muck boots and a clipboard for the first 90 minutes without speaking. She took core samples from 12 locations. She measured the trench Hank Garber had cut. She traced the temporary relief pipe with a thermal camera. She photographed the rerouted easement drains. She unrolled a long topographic printout from a roll tube. She set the printout on a folding table in my workshop driveway. She placed a small lead weight on each corner. She looked up at Annie and at me. She said in her precise, Stuttgart-accented English, "Frau Annie, Herr Mercer." This is a textbook intentional surface water diversion. Section 503 of the Pennsylvania Stormwater Management Act. Section 402 of the Federal Clean Water Act. Section 1361 of Title 18, U.S. Code, on willful destruction of personal property in interstate commerce. Each violation stands alone. They will stack. I will issue the state assessment by end of day. I will personally call Region 3 EPA in Philadelphia. Frau Annie, I am sorry your workshop was the proof. But it is excellent proof. By 10, Pennsylvania State Police criminal investigators were on the property. By 11, EPA Region 3 enforcement out of Philadelphia had a federal complaint open. By noon, a private investigator from the U.S. Postal Inspection Service had joined the team. Trisha's stormwater consulting billings had moved through the U.S. mail. By 1, the DEP had assessed preliminary state civil penalties at $600,000. By 3, the EPA had assessed preliminary federal civil penalties at $1.1 million. By 4, Brennan Quill had hand-delivered the easement revocation notice to the Sycamore Hollow HOA Management Company. The 90-day clock started at 4:07 p.m. on May 18th. Trisha Lockwood Sterling sent an HOA mass email that afternoon at 5:30. The subject line read, "Community Update, Unfounded Allegations." The body claimed that scurrilous allegations had been made by an angry adjoining homeowner with a long history of grievances. She used the word unfounded 8 times. The email did not mention the flow sensor. The email did not mention the audio recording. The email did not mention Hank Garber, who had by that point been in custody at the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office for 90 minutes. The email did not mention Earl Whitaker, whom she had not realized had left the property at 6 a.m. that morning with 2 banker's boxes of memos. She thought she was still in control. She was, by then, the only person on the property who thought so. 3 days later, Trisha left a voicemail on my landline. She offered me $5,000 for any inconvenience related to recent drainage events. She offered to help facilitate replacement of any damaged equipment as a goodwill gesture. She asked me to call her back at my earliest convenience. I did not call her back. I forwarded the voicemail to Annie. Annie forwarded it to Brennan. Brennan forwarded it to the DEP and the EPA. The voicemail became evidence count 17. Over the next 90 days, we ran the case the way Annie had told me we would. The DEP took depositions. The EPA opened a parallel federal investigation. The Pennsylvania State Police indicted Tricia on 3 felony counts: intentional destruction of private property, criminal conspiracy, and unlawful conduct in connection with a discharge into waters of the Commonwealth. Hank Garber pled cooperator on the 3rd day. He gave the state everything. Earl Whitaker submitted his memos to the DEP and to Brennan Quill and to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. The memos went back to 2014. Every single warning he had given Tricia, 11 separate warnings about the unpermitted pipe, was documented, dated, and CC'd to the HOA management company. Tricia had ignored every one. The HOA management company had filed every one without raising a flag. The management company was added to the case as a defendant on day 22. While the case ran, I rebuilt. Bart Kunkel pumped the workshop dry by the 2nd week. Insurance adjusters cataloged the loss at $147,000. The bandsaw motor went to a rebuilder in Allentown. The saw stop went to a custom electronics shop in Reading. The kiln control board was a total loss. The flooring needed full replacement. The dust collection ducting needed flushing. Joanne's pyrography rack was salvaged whole. Bart's crew built me a temporary plywood workshop in the dairy barn so I could keep working through the summer. I built 3 small commissions in that plywood shop that summer. One of them was a memorial bench for a customer in Strasbourg whose son had died in Afghanistan. I delivered the bench in August. The customer cried when I set it down. I told him I understood. I spent the 89 days quietly. I worked in the dairy barn temporary shop. I made the memorial bench for the customer in Strasbourg. I made a sideboard for a young couple in Lidditz who had bought their first house. I made a small cradle for a granddaughter Annie did not yet have but would, she promised, before I died. I made each piece by hand. I sanded each surface with the same Belgian boxwood block Joanne had given me for our 30th anniversary. The block had her thumbprint worn into the grain. The sanding was meditation. I had learned over 49 years at the bench that meditation, for a man like me, was always going to be motion. Wood was motion that left a record. The 89 days passed. I did not lose my mind. I did not get angry. I waited. On the 89th day, Annie and I drove out to the north property line at dawn. The 90-day easement revocation clock was about to run out at noon. Brennan had filed all the paperwork. The DEP had approved the restoration berm under Pennsylvania best management practices. The EPA had signed off on the natural watershed restoration. I had hired Bart Kunkel and Earl Whitaker. Earl had quietly resigned from Sycamore Hollow 2 weeks earlier to do the drainage work together. Bart drove the backhoe. Earl operated the manual cuts. Annie supervised in her DEP windbreaker. I sat on the tailgate of Bart's pickup with a thermos of coffee. The drainage move took 6 hours and 11 minutes. Bart cut the trench across the north property line. Earl severed the unpermitted 24-inch concrete pipe at its joint. They capped the pipe on the Mercer side. They opened the natural swale my grandfather had laid out in 1958. They re-established the historical north-to-south flow with a single 40-foot earthen berm, 8 feet wide at the base, 3 feet tall, planted with native switchgrass and wild rye seed. The berm was the move. The simplest line on Annie's 2-year-old map. The whole story. We finished at 12:14 p.m. The rain started Thursday. It rained for 3 days. Pennsylvania thunderstorms, August, the kind that dropped 2 inches between dinner and dawn. The water on the Sycamore Hollow property had nowhere to go but where the watershed had always taken it, south, downhill, through what was now the 13th fairway, the 14th fairway, and the 15th fairway. By Saturday morning, the 13th pond had overflowed its banks. By Saturday afternoon, the 14th fairway was standing water. By Sunday morning, the 15th fairway was a small lake. The clubhouse pool deck flooded from below. Water came up through the expansion joints at 3 p.m. The cart paths across the 15th and 16th eroded into mud channels by evening. The pro shop took 2 feet of water in the basement. The tennis courts on the southwest corner became unplayable for the foreseeable future. Tricia called me at 6:14 on Sunday evening. Her voice was a different voice than the one she had used for 11 complaints and a flooded workshop. She was screaming. She was sobbing. She told me I had destroyed the entire community fabric of Sycamore Hollow. She told me I had single-handedly ruined a Tom Fazio design. She told me I had weaponized an obscure legal technicality against a charitable community asset. The word charitable was a particular choice. The HOA had never been a charity. The water had never cared about the design. The technicality had been a clause Howard Garrick had insisted on in 1986. She told me I had destroyed the community. She told me I had committed an act of vandalism. She told me she would sue me into the next century. I let her talk for 46 seconds. Then I said, "Mrs. Sterling, your 3 holes are receiving the water that has flowed through that land for 10,000 years. I removed an unpermitted pipe from my own property. The state of Pennsylvania, the federal EPA, and the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection have approved every action I took. I am holding in my hand a copy of the easement revocation, the DEP restoration permit, the EPA consent acknowledgement, and the state police criminal complaint. I will send copies to your attorney by close of business tomorrow. Do not call this number again." I hung up. Annie squeezed my shoulder. I did not feel proud. I did not feel angry. I felt, mostly, the way a man feels when he has finally fixed the leak he should not have had to fix. In the 3 weeks before the hearing, Sycamore Hollow Estates went through a small civil war. 17 homeowners, the same 17 who would walk out of the courtroom together in September, circulated a no-confidence petition against the standing board. The petition gathered 62 signatures by the second weekend. A retired Bethlehem steel engineer named Vernon Pemberton Crow, no relation to the Tate family's Pemberton, just a Lancaster County coincidence, drafted the bylaws amendments necessary to call a special election. He hand-delivered them to the management company on a Wednesday morning with 3 witnesses. The management company tried to refuse them. Vernon told them, mildly, "I have 9 attorneys CC'd on this delivery, 3 of them my sons. You can refuse this petition, or you can keep your contract. You may not do both." The management company accepted the petition by close of business. The special election was scheduled for early October. The combined enforcement hearing was held at the Lancaster County Courthouse on September 23rd. The room held 110 people. Every seat was full. The Philadelphia Inquirer had a reporter. The Lancaster Online had 2. The state DEP read its assessment into the record. $640,000 in civil penalties. The federal EPA Region 3 read its assessment. $1.1 million in Clean Water Act administrative penalties under Section 309G. The Pennsylvania State Police read the criminal indictment. 3 felony counts plus embezzlement plus mail fraud. The Postal Inspection Service joined the federal mail fraud count. The Sycamore Hollow HOA Management Company entered a consent decree with the DEP for $150,000 in supervisory penalties. Brennan Quill moved for summary dismissal of Tricia's threatened civil suit. The judge granted it from the bench. Brennan then read a single statement from me into the record. The statement was 3 sentences long. The 3rd sentence was, "The land remembers, the water remembers, so do I." $2,190,000 in total assessments and penalties, plus criminal exposure of up to 12 years on the state counts and 7 on the federal. The room rose. They did not chant. They sat back down. Then, slow, the 17 Sycamore Hollow homeowners in the third and fourth rows, the ones Earl Whitaker had quietly contacted in August, the ones who were tired of Tricia, stood up. They walked out into the hall. They did not look at Tricia. The message was the message. Tricia Lockwood Sterling took a plea deal in November. 24 months in federal custody for the Clean Water Act and mail fraud counts. 18 months state on the embezzlement and conspiracy counts. 5 years probation. $292,000 in restitution to the Sycamore Hollow HOA. $147,000 in restitution to me personally. A permanent ban from serving on any Pennsylvania community board. Reed Sterling filed for divorce in December. The hedge fund quietly wound down in February under SEC review. The Sycamore Hollow HOA elected a new board in October. Earl Whitaker was reinstated as superintendent at a raise. The board hired a Pittsburgh-based environmental engineering firm to redesign the golf course's stormwater system in full compliance with state and federal permitting. The redesign reduced the course from 18 holes to 15. The 3 flooded holes were ceded back to the natural watershed. The Pennsylvania Game Commission partnered with the Mercer family and the new HOA to dedicate the 8-acre permanent wetland as the Joanne Mercer Wetland Preserve, named for my wife. Native plantings went in the following spring. Wood ducks returned the next summer. A great blue heron nested in the 14th fairway in May. Annie cried when she saw the first photographs. So did Earl. So did Bart. The workshop was rebuilt by December. I added a second floor, 800 square feet, for a small teaching classroom. The first apprentice of the Joanne Mercer Memorial Apprenticeship Fund, a 16-year-old high school junior from Lidditz named June Hadley, started her 2-year residency in January. She wants to build acoustic guitars. I am teaching her finish work first. She has good hands. Joanne would have loved her. Joanne would have insisted on buying her a leather apron. I did, in February. June keeps it folded on her stool. Her first finished piece was a small walnut jewelry box for her grandmother. She built the dovetails by hand on her 3rd attempt and refused to use a jig on her 4th. Her grandmother cried when she opened it on Mother's Day. June's mother sent me a photograph. The photograph hangs above the bandsaw now. It is one of 3 photographs in my workshop. Joanne's wedding picture is the 2nd. The Wetland Preserve ribbon cutting with the 6th graders is the 3rd. The Joanne Mercer Wetland Preserve held its dedication on a Saturday morning in May. 240 people came. Earl Whitaker spoke. Annie spoke. Vernon Pemberton Crow, now the new HOA board president, spoke. The Pennsylvania Game Commission's Southeast Regional Director cut a green ribbon. The Mennonite school down the road sent a 6th grade class to plant arrowwood and elderberry along the new 14th fairway shoreline. June Hadley, my new apprentice, planted 3 pin oaks along the bench where I would sit on cool evenings to watch the herons. The herons came on the 3rd week of May. There are now 2 breeding pairs. There are also wood frogs, spring peepers, 4 species of dragonfly, and a small muskrat lodge near the old 13th tee. The course superintendent's office moved into a new building made of timber I had milled from a sycamore that came down in the same August storm that flooded my workshop. The sycamore had stood on the Hostetler farm since 1882. Earl had asked if he could have the wood. I had given it to him. He built his new office from it himself. The cherry slabs came out of the dairy barn in March. I built Joanne's headstone bench from one of them. It sits next to her grave, under the white oak in the family plot. The bench has her pyrography signature carved into the underside of the seat, where only the rain can see it. The other 2 slabs are waiting for the right thing to be. I am not in a hurry. I sit on my porch in the evenings now, with a cup of coffee and the sound of the new wetland alive with frogs. Annie drives down every other weekend. Earl comes for Sunday supper once a month. Bart still owes me a poker night. Brennan Quill sends a Christmas card every year with a single line of handwriting at the bottom that reads, "The clause held." Howard Garrick passed in 2023, But his son keeps the original 1986 easement document in a framed display case at the front of his Lancaster office. He tells new clients about it. He tells them what a well-written clause looks like after 38 years of patience. The seventh-generation Mercer fence line runs straight north along the historical watershed. The land remembers. The water remembers. So do I. If you have ever had a Karen weaponize gravity on something you built, leave a comment below. Tell me what she tried. Tell me what you did back. I read every one. The stories you send me are the reason I keep telling these. If this one warmed you, hit subscribe so the next one finds you. Next week, we've got a single mother in rural Indiana whose HOA Karen tried to tear down her son's swing set. There is a wedding video the Karen did not know was running. That story is coming Friday. In the meantime, know your watershed. Read your easements. Listen to the land. The simplest line on the page is usually the whole story. A reporter from the Lancaster Online called me in April for a follow-up piece on the wetland. She asked me what the easement revocation had cost me personally, beyond the money. I thought about it. I said, it cost me 3 years of patience and 1 workshop full of equipment. It bought me a clean creek and a working watershed and a chance to teach a 16-year-old how to build something that will outlast both of us. She asked me if I would do it again. I said, I would do it sooner. She asked me what I would tell other landowners watching their property be quietly stolen by gravity. I said, call your daughter. If you do not have a daughter who measures water, find one. Most counties have a soil and water conservation district. Most states have a DEP. Most of them have people like Annie. They are waiting for your call. Make it before the water rises. That is the story.